I'm Роберт Зубрін. I'm president of the Mars Society, and we're here at the International Astronautical Congress. Japanese Space Agency. Japan has a real interest in developing the moon. Japan is going to be sending some small rovers to the moon. And they're going to be a participant in the American Artemis moon program. Here is a small lander that is being developed by the Japanese, both the space agency and a entrepreneurial company based in Japan called iSpace. This lander will deliver a small rover to the moon and get some exploration going. Rocketdyne, that's the RS-25. It's very similar to the Space Shuttle main engine, and it is going to be the engine of the SLS booster, heavy lift booster that has been a long time in development, but may see flight in a year or two. This is an interesting rover here. This is put together by an entrepreneurial company called Offworld. And they're actually developing these things for many terrestrial applications, mining, underground work. So this is a significantly more muscular rover than what most people are talking about sending to the moon or Mars. But in fact, I believe what NASA needs to do if it wants to get Mars exploration going is develop a 10-ton class lunar Mars lander. Okay, which is the minimum you need to send humans to the surface of Mars. That would be able to send a platoon of rovers like this, as well as smaller ones, to Mars in advance and build the whole base before the people arrive. So this company called Offworld is attempting to finance itself by developing these things for Earth application first, but then they'll be available for the Moon and Mars as well. Is a company developing electric thrusters. There's a lot of companies developing electric thrusters right now because the micro spacecraft revolution, little spacecrafts the size of this, need some propulsion to get positioned or maintained in the orbits that they want to go to. Electric propulsion is extremely efficient. It has 5 to 10 times the exhaust velocity of chemical propulsion. It is actually more attractive for small spacecraft than it is for large human spacecraft because the thrust level is very low, but that is okay for small unmanned spacecraft, which themselves are very light and also where there is not an imperative to get where they need to go quickly. Luxembourg's a very small country, but they've decided to try to have a significant role in space, and in particular, they've been interested in funding or participating in funding the development of technologies for creating space resources. That is, there's no such thing as a natural resource. There's only natural raw materials. It's human creativity, it's human resourcefulness that turns materials into resources. And the issue of whether we can really settle space will depend upon whether we can take the materials there and turn them into resources. And Luxembourg has decided to become a center for the financing of companies that are into developing space resources. So there it is, they say space resources, an initiative of the Luxembourg Space Agency. Well, let's see what Boeing has to offer. Now this looks like a bus, so I guess it's an exhibit inside of there. But Boeing, of course, has had a major role in the International Space Station, and they are developing a capsule they call Starliner. It can kind of do the same kinds of things that Orion can do. It's not in as advanced state of development yet. New Zealand has a very small space program, but they've actually reached orbit, not so much through the efforts of the space agency themselves, but an entrepreneurial company called Rocket Lab, which was founded by a working engineer in New Zealand who has gotten like $300 million in investment and created a launch system which has reached orbit. So New Zealand is actually delivering small satellites to orbit, not through a government effort, but through an entrepreneurial effort that was initiated in New Zealand. And this perhaps is the wave of the future. This is a very interesting company made in space. What these guys have done, they're interested in manufacturing in space. And one thing I know they've done is they've taken, they've made fiber optic cables on the International Space Station of much higher quality than can be made on Earth, that can have zero losses. They're fantastic. So this is a product that you can only make in space that is of sufficient value to actually justify delivering raw materials to orbit, making the product, and then delivering it back to Earth. Polish Space Agency. This gentleman here actually was the leader of a Polish team that came in second in the Mars Society's International Mars Colony Design Contest. There were 100 entrants, exactly 100 entrants from around the world, and we just had the finals at our conference in Los Angeles, and so there were 10 finalists, and they came in number 2 out of 10. Do you have any remarks?
I think we came second.
Yes, number 2.
MIT had a great project, but I think my students also did their best, and we proposed something unique and something, first of all, beautiful and technically coherent. And I guess we will see all other entries in the newest book by Mars Society soon enough.
But they've also set up a European Rover Challenge contest that they hold in Poland every year. And I think it'd be really great if we saw some Ukrainian teams come and compete in that. Oh, and here's Firefly. So this is the Ukrainian-American joint effort. This is, they've got a lunar lander that they've designed. This is a full-scale model. But of course, their main emphasis is on creating a launch vehicle. It's a small launch vehicle. And just as Rocket Lab has realized, there's a big market for small launch vehicles because with the advance of electronics, it's now possible to build spacecraft that are tiny, just like there's now possible to make computers that are tiny. I think Ukraine can play a significant role in the world space program. Ukraine was responsible for about half of the Soviet space program, which of course was the first space program to reach orbit, the first space program to send a person into orbit, the first space program to send a probe around the moon, first space program to reach Venus, basically a sufficient fraction of that talent is in Ukraine. the Mars Global Surveyor satellite that we sent to Mars, that program cost $150 million. That's the cost of a shopping mall. Okay, Ukraine could afford to do that. Okay, I know that money is tight and so forth in Ukraine, but you know, Ukraine is now a free nation, and it could be a great nation, and great nations do great things. And if Ukraine was to take the initiative in sending, say, an orbiter to Mars, and participating along with other countries in this international Mars exploration effort, or even the moon, it would say to any young person in Ukraine, learn your science and you could be an explorer of new worlds. And out of that, you would get millions of young scientists, engineers, inventors, doctors, technological entrepreneurs, okay, that would not only enable your space program, but would enable your industry, your economy, your national defense in any number of ways. I think it's very important that Ukraine have a vibrant space program. Frankly, it's essential as a matter of national defense. The defeat that Ukraine took in the Donbass in the late summer of 2014 was caused by the fact that they did not have independent satellite reconnaissance capability that allowed them to be surprised by the Russian counterattack. As an American, I'm very ashamed of the fact that we did not supply the intelligence to Ukraine that would have allowed them to not be surprised. But it goes to show that any nation must be able to take care of itself. And certainly reconnaissance information from space is an essential component of national defense. So there could be no country more in need of a space program than Ukraine. But the space program, you know, a reconnaissance satellite that you put in orbit around Earth, you can put it in orbit around the moon and use it to explore the moon, and vice versa. So developing Ukraine's expertise in the space area is essential for all sorts of reasons. And I think you can do it. You just got to decide to do it.